We are created in the image of God. In many languages, image literally means a copy of one's face, a copy of one's face. So we are created as copies of the face of God. Why it is worth being reminded of? Because our face is the most precious part of our personality, not of our body, but our personality. In our first reading, God spoke to Moses face to face. He shared with the people what he heard from God in person. And as we read, he put all the commandments of the Lord into writing. So all this, all the life-giving law, comes from that face-to-face encounter. In our second reading, we see how Jesus, as our high priest, goes into the sanctuary to offer his sacrifice. As our high priest, he communicates with the Father face to face, even if we don't see it. As John's Gospel, when he describes the Last Supper, you remember when we spoke about the seating arrangement, they were reclining around the table, and the beloved disciple was at the bosom of Jesus, just as Jesus dwells at the bosom of the Father, face to face, closeness to closeness. This and our face-to-face meetings are so important. Why? Because when we see someone, when we are talking to someone, when we are in the presence of another person discussing anything, or even without words, there is a sense of responsibility for the other people. There is a sense of moral responsibility in us, which is alive. This is built in when human beings meet face to face. And we cannot switch off that responsibility. If you are talking to heart with someone, you really admit that I'm responsible for this situation. The other person is responsible for me. And you can't switch off that moral obligation. It is a bit like when we hold a photo of our beloved ones on our table, on our desk, or we have a photo in our purse next to our Oyster card of our daughter, husband, wife, a friend, grandchild, newly born great-grandchild. We feel something similar when we look at a photo of a beloved one. We feel that we belong to each other. You are ready to make sacrifices for them. You are ready to pray for them, to cherish warm thoughts when you feel proud that you have them or you have had them in their lives. They also feel their love. We feel belonging. We feel our commitment. And when we celebrate the feast, what is in Latin called Corpus Christi, literally the body of Christ, when we celebrate the Eucharist, when we receive the Holy Communion, something similar happens to us. We meet Jesus in the sacraments face to face. Even if we don't see it with our physical eyes, but the eye of our soul, the eye of our faith, sees his real face, his beautiful face. In the Holy Communion, we feel his love. After Mass, after our procession, when the elderly and the sick are receiving the sacrament of healing, we are going to feel his healing love. And we also feel responsibility for his life in us. We feel responsibility for the life of our faith together. But when we see his face, and when we are seen by his face in person, we also feel responsibility for our families, for our personal relationships, and for the life of the local church. And through all this, through the life of the whole Catholic Church, for all the churches worldwide. So, dear brother and sister, let us celebrate that we are given this precious nourishment which doesn't allow to switch off our responsibility, which doesn't let us to switch off our love for the other person. Let us celebrate in our procession, in the Holy Mass, on the feast of the body of Christ, this face-to-face encounter, because there's a big difference. The problem is that this love, this responsibility can be switched off. By default, if we don't return to the presence of the human person, if we don't return to a regular worship and prayer to God, sooner or later, this moral sense for the other will be switched off. A good illustration of it is the cyberspace. When we are using the internet, this responsibility can be switched off. We don't feel those limits, and we watch things, most often dummy things, waste of time, how a car is blown up, how a soldier is killed by a drone, how someone is murdered on the street, or we share all kinds of stupid things. It's part of human nature, we cannot deny it, but it's an illustration that it can be switched off. So on this precious feast, let it be a reminder that we have to take full responsibility for our actions. Let us be reminded by the body and blood of Christ which we receive in the Holy Communion that we need that face-to-face encounter. And the most important face-to-face encounter in an adult person's life is Sunday worship. In it, far more things are happening what we are conscious of. We are seen by the loving face of Christ, and by his glance, by his healing and loving touch, our face comes fully alive. And just as an illustration, because vanity is part of human nature, just compare your face in the mirror before you came to church. And when you go home, look into the mirror. You will see your face, heart, and love renewed. You can see yourself in your full beauty.